Madison, 27, stared at the declined payment notification on her phone as her mother Judith's voice echoed through the upscale restaurant. "What do you mean the card isn't working?" The waiter shifted uncomfortably while her father Roger studied the menu, pretending not to hear. 3 hours earlier, Madison had frozen her account after enduring 2 weeks of funding their family vacation while being told repeatedly it wasn't about her. Now, watching panic flash across her mother's face, Madison felt something she hadn't experienced in years: control. And it was absolutely delicious. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Take a second to drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to set boundaries with family members who took advantage of you. Trust me, this story about how I finally stood up to my parents after years of financial manipulation is going to make your jaw drop, especially when you see what happened when their card was declined at that 5-star restaurant in Hawaii. I never planned to freeze my parents' access to my credit card in the middle of our family vacation. But looking back, I realized this moment had been building for 27 years. My name is Madison Lawrence, and I've always been the responsible one. While other kids in my neighborhood were spending their allowances on candy and toys, I was opening my first savings account at 12. By 16, I was working part-time at the local grocery store, setting aside money for college. My parents, Judith and Roger, never hid the fact that they wouldn't be contributing to my education. "We believe in self-sufficiency," my mother would say, while simultaneously booking another cruise or purchasing a new car. After high school, I put myself through college, working 3 jobs while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I graduated with a degree in finance, secured a position at a prestigious firm in Boston, and slowly climbed the corporate ladder. By 27, I had become a senior financial analyst, managing portfolios worth millions. I had also managed to pay off my student loans, purchase a modest condo, and build a respectable emergency fund. What I hadn't managed to do was establish healthy boundaries with my parents. Since my first job, I had been the family bank. When my father's business venture failed, I covered their mortgage for 6 months. When my mother needed dental work, I paid the $8,000 bill without hesitation. When their car broke down, I financed the new one, all while hearing how I should be more generous and family-oriented. My sister Allison, 2 years younger, had watched this pattern unfold and quietly established her own boundaries. She moved to Seattle after college, limited her visits home, and became mysteriously busy whenever financial assistance was needed. I envied her strength, but couldn't bring myself to follow her example. Some misplaced sense of duty kept me tethered to my parents' financial needs. So when my mother called in January suggesting a reconciliation family vacation to Hawaii, I felt a familiar spark of hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this trip would finally help us establish the warm, supportive relationship I'd always craved. "We need to reconnect as a family," Judith said. "Your father is retiring soon, and we want to create lasting memories with our daughters." I immediately agreed, excitement bubbling up despite my usual caution. A week later, my mother sent me links to luxury resorts in Maui, asking for my input on accommodations. I should have recognized the pattern when she added my credit card to the booking information, just to hold the reservation, but optimism clouded my judgment. My best friend Stephanie noticed my renewed enthusiasm about my family and invited me for coffee. We sat at our favorite cafe as I shared the vacation plans. "Madison, I'm concerned," Stephanie said, stirring her latte slowly. "Every time you get your hopes up about your parents, you end up hurt and drained, emotionally and financially." "This time feels different," I insisted. "They specifically said it's about reconnecting." Stephanie raised an eyebrow. "Have you discussed how expenses will be shared?" I hesitated. "Not explicitly, but I'm sure we'll figure it out." "And that's exactly how they take advantage of you," Stephanie replied. "You need to set clear boundaries before you go. Explicit conversations about who pays for what." I promised I would, but knew deep down I probably wouldn't. A confrontation with my parents always ended the same way, with me apologizing for being difficult and them getting exactly what they wanted. A week before departure, I called Allison to confirm final details, only to learn she wasn't coming. I couldn't get the time off work, she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. Allison, please. It won't be the same without you. Madison, she sighed. Don't you think it's suspicious that Mom and Dad suddenly want a luxury family vacation right after you mentioned your bonus? I dismissed her concerns, though unease began to creep in. That feeling intensified the next day when my mother casually mentioned they had invited a few friends to join us. What friends? I asked, phone pressed to my ear as I reviewed my packing list. Oh, just Gerald and Barbara and Patricia and Donald. You remember them from the neighborhood. They're such good company, and they've been wanting to see Hawaii. 4 additional people. My stomach tightened as I realized what this meant for the accommodations and activities I'd already paid deposits for. But instead of speaking up, I remained silent, telling myself this was still an opportunity to strengthen family bonds. One last chance to create the relationship I'd always wanted. I just had no idea how much that chance would cost me. The first red flag appeared at the airport. I arrived early, as I always do, and waited at the designated meeting spot near the check-in counter. When my parents finally appeared, rolling designer luggage behind them and flanked by their 4 friends, my mother's first words weren't hello or thank you for organizing this, but rather, Madison, be a dear and check us in. We've got everything under your confirmation number. As I approached the counter and handed over my ID, the airline representative smiled. Ah yes, Ms. Lawrence. I see you're traveling with a party of 7 today. Just to confirm, you're in seat 28B, and the rest of your party is in first class, seats 2A through 2F. I blinked. There must be a mistake. We should all be in the same class. The representative checked again. The reservation shows 1 economy ticket and 6 first-class tickets. The first-class tickets were upgraded 2 weeks ago. I glanced back at my parents, who were chatting animatedly with their friends, deliberately avoiding eye contact with me. Swallowing my frustration, I collected my boarding pass and wheeled my carry-on toward the security line. The 6-hour flight gave me plenty of time to stew in economy while my parents and their friends enjoyed champagne and reclining seats. By the time we landed in Maui, I had resolved to have a direct conversation about expectations for the trip. That resolution evaporated at the resort check-in when I discovered another unpleasant surprise. We've got you in a standard garden view room, the receptionist said, and the rest of your party is in our oceanfront suites. The suites, I would later discover, cost triple what my room did. All charged to my credit card, of course. That evening, we gathered for dinner at the resort's upscale restaurant. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink hues. Under different circumstances, it would have been breathtaking. Instead, I was calculating how much this meal would cost me as everyone ordered cocktails and appetizers. My mother clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. I want to propose a toast to my wonderful daughter Madison, she announced, causing a momentary flutter of appreciation in my chest. Who has been so successful in her career and is generously treating us all to this magnificent vacation. The table erupted in cheers while I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips. Mom, I said quietly, I didn't agree to pay for everyone. Judith's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. Don't be ridiculous, Madison. You're doing so well financially, and your father and I gave you everything growing up. This is the least you can do to show your appreciation. Gerald, my father's golf buddy, raised his glass higher. To Madison's success and generosity. Everyone drank while I sat there, humiliation burning my cheeks. I tried again later that night, knocking on my parents' suite door, determined to establish some financial boundaries. Mom, Dad, we need to talk about expenses for this trip. My father barely looked up from his phone. What's there to talk about? You've got that big finance job. We're retired. This is how family works. But I didn't budget for 6 additional people. I can't afford to pay for everyone's meals, activities, and accommodations for 2 weeks. My mother emerged from the bathroom in a plush resort robe. Madison, you're making everything about yourself again.
This trip isn't about you.
It's about family reconnecting. The irony of her statement while standing in a suite I was paying for wasn't lost on me, but years of conditioning had me backing down once again. The next morning, we took a group excursion to a famous snorkeling spot. As everyone boarded the catamaran, I noticed the tour guide checking names off a list. Lawrence Party of 7, he confirmed. That'll be $1,190 charged to the card on file. Before I could object, my mother handed him my card from her purse. I didn't even remember giving it to her. During the excursion, everyone posed for photos on the boat. Madison, take our picture, my mother called, not once suggesting I join the group photo. I became the designated photographer, documenting a vacation I was funding, but not truly part of. That night, I called Allison, desperate for understanding. They're using you, Maddie, she said bluntly. It's why I refused to come. Last family trip, they did the same thing to me until I put my foot down. Then they called me selfish and turned to you instead. Why didn't you warn me? I asked, fighting back tears. Would you have believed me? You always want to see the best in them. She was right. Even now, part of me was making excuses for their behavior. The next day brought a shopping excursion to Lahaina. I had planned to buy some small souvenirs, but my budget-conscious plans were derailed when my mother dragged me into a high-end boutique. Oh, this would look lovely on you, Barbara, Judith exclaimed, holding up a silk scarf priced at $180. Before I could intervene, she had handed it to the cashier along with my credit card.
Mom.
You can't just. Don't be petty, Madison, she hissed under her breath. These are our friends. Throughout the afternoon, the pattern repeated. A pair of sunglasses for Patricia, a designer polo for Gerald, an expensive watch for my father, all purchased with my card, all without my consent. Later, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. I was returning from the restroom at the restaurant when I caught my parents talking with their friends at the table. Madison owes us this trip, my mother was saying. Do you know how much we sacrificed to raise her? All those dance lessons and summer camps. My father nodded. She's just doing her duty as a daughter. In our day, children took care of their parents without complaining. The summer camps she mentioned had been paid for by my grandparents. The dance lessons lasted all of 2 months before they decided it was too expensive. The narrative they had created bore no resemblance to my actual childhood. As I stood there, hidden from view, memories flooded back. My college years working at the campus cafeteria, the local bar, and as a tutor, often getting only 4 hours of sleep. Meanwhile, my parents had taken a Mediterranean cruise, sending me postcards from Barcelona and Rome. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Nothing had changed. They had never seen me as an individual with my own needs and boundaries. I was simply a resource to be exploited. That night, lying in my garden view room with its distant view of the parking lot, I finally acknowledged the truth Allison and Stephanie had been trying to tell me for years. This trip wasn't about reconnecting. It was about using me once again. The next morning, I tried one last time to speak with my father alone, catching him on the resort grounds before everyone else was awake. Dad, I'm really struggling with how this trip is going. I feel like I'm just here to pay for everything. Roger sighed dramatically. There you go again, making everything about yourself. This trip is about family, Madison, not your bank account. As he walked away, I realized that in their minds, I wasn't even part of the family they kept referring to. I was merely the funding source. By the end of the first week, I decided to check my credit card statement online. The resort had a business center with free computer access, and I logged in with shaking hands, dreading what I would find. The total made me physically ill. $14,768 already charged, and we were only halfway through the trip. The itemized statement revealed charges I hadn't authorized, spa treatments for my mother and her friends, golf outings for my father and Gerald, a sunset dinner cruise I hadn't even been invited to. Scrolling through the transactions, I discovered my parents had somehow used my card information to book additional excursions for the coming week, a helicopter tour of the island, a private luau, and a deep-sea fishing charter. None of these had been discussed with me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Meet us for breakfast at the Terrace restaurant. We're discussing today's plans. At breakfast, I arrived determined to establish some financial limits. Everyone was already seated, menus open, mimosas ordered. Before we order, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I need to discuss the budget for the rest of the trip. My mother's smile tightened. Budget? What an unpleasant topic for breakfast. I've already spent nearly $15,000 on this vacation, I continued. I can't afford much more. The table fell silent. Patricia and Donald exchanged uncomfortable glances. Perhaps we should give the family some privacy, Barbara suggested, starting to rise. Nonsense, my mother replied sharply. Madison is just being dramatic. She makes six figures in that fancy finance job of hers. That doesn't mean I have unlimited funds, I protested. I have my mortgage, retirement contributions, and other responsibilities. My father chuckled condescendingly. Listen to her talking about responsibilities. When I was your age, I was supporting a family of 4. The conversation devolved from there, with my parents dismissing my concerns and their friends watching the uncomfortable exchange. By the end of breakfast, nothing had been resolved, and I had been thoroughly humiliated in front of everyone. Once again, I retreated, too conditioned to keep the peace. Later that day, I overheard Patricia talking to Barbara by the pool, not realizing I was around the corner on a lounge chair. Judith and Roger have been so generous, inviting us on these trips, Patricia was saying. Remember Aspen last year? And that cruise to Alaska? I know, Barbara replied. We could never afford vacations like these otherwise. It's wonderful having a friend whose daughter is so successful. My stomach churned as I realized this wasn't the first time my parents had used me to finance vacations for their friends. They had been doing this for years, positioning themselves as the generous hosts while my bank account took the hit. That afternoon, I expressed interest in attending a traditional Hawaiian cultural demonstration. Oh, we've already made plans, my mother dismissed. We're doing a private wine tasting tour. I wasn't told about this, I said. It was last minute. Gerald knows the vineyard owner. She held out her hand. We'll need your card for the deposit. I'd really prefer to do the cultural demonstration, I insisted. My mother's expression hardened. Madison, don't be difficult. Everyone else wants to do the wine tour. Once again, what I wanted didn't matter. I handed over my card, then watched from the resort lobby as they all piled into a luxury van without so much as a backward glance at me. That evening, sitting alone on my balcony, I checked my bank account and felt a wave of panic. My savings were being depleted at an alarming rate. My rent and utilities were automatically scheduled to process in 3 days, and if this spending continued, I might not have sufficient funds. I called Stephanie, no longer able to hold back tears. They're using me, Steph. Just like you warned. They invited 4 friends without telling me, and I'm expected to pay for everything. I've spent almost $15,000 in a week. Madison, this is financial abuse, Stephanie said firmly. You need to put a stop to it immediately. How? If I confront them, they'll just manipulate me like they always do. Then don't confront them. Just cut off the money. Cancel your card. I can't do that in the middle of a vacation, I protested. Why not? They didn't consult you before inviting 4 extra people or booking first-class tickets. You don't owe them a consultation before protecting your finances. Her words resonated, but years of conditioning made it difficult to imagine standing up to my parents so decisively. The next morning, my father cornered me on my way to the beach. Madison, I've been meaning to talk to you, he began, his tone unusually friendly. Your mother and I are thinking of renovating the kitchen after this trip. Nothing fancy, just new countertops and appliances. I knew where this was heading. That sounds nice, Dad. We were hoping you might help us out with a loan. Just $20,000 or so. You'd be the first one invited for holiday dinners with a new kitchen, he added, as if that were adequate compensation. I'll have to check my finances, I replied noncommittally. He frowned. You know, sometimes I wonder if that finance job is good for you. You've become very calculating about money. Not very family-oriented. The irony of him criticizing me while asking for a loan was staggering, but I had learned that pointing out such contradictions only led to more gaslighting. Later that day, I found an unexpected ally. Thomas, the hotel manager, noticed me sitting alone in the lobby, visibly upset after another tense interaction with my mother. "Is everything all right, Ms. Lawrence?" he asked, sitting beside me. Something about his kind, professional demeanor broke through my facade. "Not really. I'm having some family issues." Thomas nodded knowingly. Family dynamics can be complicated, especially on vacation when everyone's together 24/7. "Have you seen this before?" I asked. "More often than you might think," he admitted. "We see all kinds of family situations here, including ones where one family member seems to be covering all expenses without receiving much appreciation." His observation was so accurate that fresh tears welled in my eyes. "Whatever you decide to do," Thomas said quietly, "remember that the resort can arrange alternate accommodations or travel plans discreetly if needed." His words planted a seed in my mind. For the first time, I began to consider an exit strategy. The breaking point came the next morning. My mother appeared at my door at 7 a.m., already dressed for the day. "Madison, I've booked the girls for a spa day," she announced. 4-hour packages for me, Barbara, and Patricia. They have an opening at 9 a.m. I didn't agree to that, I said, still groggy from sleep. "Don't be selfish. This trip isn't about you," she snapped, holding out her hand. "I need your card. The total is $1,800 plus gratuity." Those words that she had thrown at me repeatedly throughout the trip, "This trip isn't about you," finally crystallized everything. She was right. This trip wasn't about me. It never had been. It was about using me. As I mechanically handed over my card, something shifted inside me. A lifetime of accommodating their demands at my own expense suddenly felt unbearable. I watched my mother walk away with my credit card, and in that moment, I began planning my rebellion. The next day, we all gathered for lunch at an upscale oceanfront restaurant in Wailea. Everyone ordered extravagantly, knowing they wouldn't see the bill. My father selected an expensive bottle of champagne to celebrate our wonderful time together, while my mother and her friends discussed which spa treatments they would book next. I sat quietly, picking at my salad, a strange calm settling over me. After years of anxiety about disappointing my parents, I suddenly felt nothing but clarity. My mother had my physical credit card in her purse, but she didn't control my bank account. "I need to use the restroom," I announced, standing up from the table. No one really acknowledged me as I walked away, too engrossed in planning their afternoon activities. In a private stall in the elegant restroom, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. My hands were steady as I navigated to the card management section. There it was, a simple option I had never used before: freeze card. A warning appeared. "This will temporarily prevent any new charges to your card. Are you sure you want to proceed?" I thought about all the years I'd been the family ATM. I thought about the cultural demonstration I'd wanted to attend. I thought about my dwindling savings account and upcoming rent payment. I thought about my mother's words, "This trip isn't about you." I pressed confirm. A notification appeared. "Card successfully frozen. No new charges will be processed until you unfreeze your card." I took a deep breath, applied fresh lipstick, and returned to the table with a genuine smile for the first time in days. "Everything okay?" my father asked, noticing my changed demeanor. "Perfect," I replied, taking a sip of water. "Everything is exactly as it should be." Lunch continued for another hour. More wine was ordered. Desserts were selected. I participated in the conversation minimally, watching the minutes tick by, knowing what was coming. Finally, my mother signaled for the check. The waiter presented the leather folder discreetly, and she opened it, barely glancing at the total before inserting my credit card. I watched with detached fascination as the waiter returned a few minutes later, his expression uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the card has been declined." My mother's face flushed. "That's impossible. Try it again." The waiter nodded apologetically. "I already ran it twice. The system is showing the card has been frozen." All eyes turned to me. My mother's expression shifted from embarrassment to fury. Madison, what is the meaning of this? I took another sip of water. The card has been frozen because I didn't authorize these charges. Unfreeze it immediately, she hissed, aware of the nearby tables. No, I said simply. My father intervened, pulling out his own wallet. I'll handle this. No need for a scene. He handed over his card with a pointed glare at me. I said nothing, knowing what would happen next. The waiter returned yet again, his discomfort now palpable. I'm sorry, sir. This card is showing as over the limit. A shocked silence fell over the table. My parents exchanged panicked glances. Their friends began to shift uncomfortably. We seem to have a problem with the cards, my father announced with forced joviality. Does anyone else have a method of payment? Patricia looked to Donald. Barbara looked to Gerald. No one moved. You all came to a restaurant without bringing any payment methods? I asked innocently. We were told all expenses were being covered, Gerald muttered, not meeting my eyes. My mother turned to me, her voice a venomous whisper. Fix this embarrassment immediately. 7 sets of eyes stared at me expectantly. In that moment, I felt a power I had never experienced before. For once, I held all the cards, or rather, the only functioning one. I'd be happy to pay for my meal, I said calmly, pulling out another card from my wallet. But just mine. Madison, my mother gasped. You can't be serious. Actually, I am. For the first time in my adult life, I'm being completely serious about my boundaries. What boundaries? My father scoffed. We're family. Family doesn't invite friends on a vacation without consulting everyone. Family doesn't book first-class tickets for some members and economy for others. Family doesn't tell someone this trip isn't about you, while simultaneously using their credit card for every expense. The neighboring tables had grown quiet, diners pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. I have paid nearly $15,000 for this vacation so far, I continued. A vacation where I've been excluded from activities, used as a photographer rather than included in photos, and repeatedly told my feelings don't matter. I'm done. I placed my card on the table. This will cover my meal only. The rest of you will need to figure out your own payment arrangements. With that, I stood up, nodded politely to the waiter, and walked out of the restaurant. Behind me, I could hear the chaos erupting, my mother's indignant voice rising above the others. But for the first time in my life, I kept walking, her words no longer having the power to pull me back into their orbit of manipulation. Outside, the Hawaiian sun was bright, the ocean breeze refreshing against my skin. I took a deep breath of salty air and felt lighter than I had in years. I pulled out my phone and texted Thomas, the hotel manager. I'd like to discuss changing my accommodations, please. I was finally putting myself first, and it felt absolutely right. Thomas met me in a discreet corner of the lobby, away from the main traffic flow. I need to move to a different room, I explained. Preferably in a different wing from my current party. He nodded, no judgment in his expression. We have a garden bungalow available. It's actually an upgrade from your current room, but I can offer it to you at the same rate under the circumstances. Within an hour, I was settled in my new accommodation, a charming private bungalow with its own small patio. I had just finished unpacking when my phone began lighting up with notifications. 5 missed calls from my mother. 7 text messages, escalating in urgency and accusation. How could you embarrass us like that? We're stranded at the restaurant. Your behavior is appalling. After everything we've done for you, call me immediately. I silenced my phone and sat on the patio, watching palm trees sway in the breeze. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge the emotional manipulation I had endured for years. The guilt trips, the gaslighting, the constant moving of goalposts so that I could never quite meet their expectations. My sister Allison called an hour later. Mom just called me in a complete state, she said when I answered. Apparently you've abandoned them at some restaurant and frozen your credit card? That's their version, I replied, then explained what had actually transpired. Allison's laughter was vindicating. Good for you, Maddie. It's about time. I've been waiting years for you to stand up to them. I feel guilty, I admitted, but also relieved. The guilt is programmed into you, Allison said. It's how they've controlled you for so long. Trust me, it fades with practice. After we hung up, I pulled out a notebook and began calculating exactly what had been spent on the trip so far. I separated legitimate family expenses from the extras my parents had added without my consent. The spa treatments, the private tours, the first-class upgrades, the friends' expenses. By my calculation, less than 30% of what I'd spent had been for actual family activities that included me. A knock at my door interrupted my accounting. I peered through the peephole to see my father standing there, his expression stern. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door, but blocked the entrance. What do you want, Dad? We need to talk about your behavior, he began, using the tone that had intimidated me since childhood. Your mother is extremely upset. I imagine she is, I replied. Financial consequences tend to be upsetting when you're not used to them. His eyes narrowed. This little rebellion needs to end now. You're making a scene and ruining everyone's vacation.
No, Dad.
You and Mom ruined my vacation the moment you invited 4 extra people without telling me, booked yourselves in first class while putting me in economy, and repeatedly told me, this trip isn't about you, while using my credit card. We're your parents, he said, as if that explained everything. Yes, you are. But that doesn't give you unlimited access to my bank account. He shifted strategies, his voice softening. Honey, we've always been proud of your success. We just wanted to show you off to our friends. By excluding me from activities and treating me like an ATM? That's not pride, Dad. That's exploitation. His facade cracked. You ungrateful little. After everything we've sacrificed for you. Name one sacrifice, I challenged. One thing you gave up for my benefit. He opened his mouth, closed it, then turned and stormed away without another word. I closed the door, my hands shaking but my resolve stronger than ever. The next day, I discovered my parents had been sharing their version of events with extended family. My cousin Natalie texted asking if I was okay, saying she'd heard I had abandoned my parents in Hawaii after having some kind of breakdown. I wasn't surprised. This was their standard playbook. Rewrite the narrative to make themselves the victims and me the villain. But this time I had evidence. I forwarded Natalie the credit card statements showing the charges, along with texts from my mother explicitly stating, this trip isn't about you, while simultaneously demanding my card for expenses. I had no idea, Natalie replied. This changes everything. Over the next 2 days, I received messages from other family members who had heard both sides of the story and were offering support. The tide of family opinion was shifting as the truth emerged. Meanwhile, my parents' friends had apparently realized they were caught in the middle of a family conflict they hadn't anticipated. Barbara approached me by the pool, her expression contrite. Madison, I want to apologize, she began. We had no idea you were covering all the expenses for this trip. Judith told us you had insisted on treating everyone. Did that seem plausible to you? I asked. That I would volunteer to pay for 4 people I barely know to join a family vacation? She had the grace to look embarrassed. When you put it that way, no. But Judith can be very convincing. Yes, she can, I agreed. She convinced me for years that financial exploitation was the same as family duty. Barbara nodded uncomfortably. Well, we've decided to check out early. This isn't the vacation we expected. One by one, my parents' friends approached with similar apologies and announcements of early departure. By dinner time, it was clear the extended group was dissolving. The resort's travel concierge, Rachel, helped me rebook my return flight separate from my parents. We can arrange a direct flight 2 days from now, she offered. Your original booking had you returning with your parents 4 days later. The direct flight sounds perfect, I said, relieved to have a concrete exit plan. That evening, my mother made one last attempt at manipulation. She appeared at my bungalow, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. Madison, how could you do this to us? She sobbed. We're stranded here with limited funds. The hotel is demanding payment for the suites. I regarded her calmly. You have credit cards, Mom. I've seen you use them for years. They're all maxed out, she admitted. We were counting on this trip being covered. By me, without my knowledge or consent, I clarified. We're your parents. We raised you. Yes, you did. And now I'm an adult making my own financial decisions. She switched tactics, her tears drying remarkably quickly. What will people think when they hear you abandoned your elderly parents in Hawaii? First, you're both in your early 60s and in excellent health. Second, I have the receipts, Mom. Literally. Every charge, every text message where you demanded my card while telling me the trip wasn't about me. She left in a huff, but I knew this wouldn't be the end of it. I spent the next morning carefully considering which expenses I was morally obligated to cover versus which ones were clearly inappropriate. I decided to transfer exactly enough money to cover my parents' basic accommodations for the remainder of their scheduled stay and their economy, not first class, return flights. Nothing for the extra excursions, spa treatments, or their friends' expenses. I sent them an email detailing exactly what I had covered and why, with a clear statement that this would be the last time I provided financial assistance without explicit prior agreement on terms. It was the most businesslike communication I'd ever had with my parents, but it was necessary to establish clear boundaries. Then I did something I had never done before on a vacation. I focused entirely on my own enjoyment.
I booked a solo snorkeling trip.
I attended the cultural demonstration I had wanted to see. I ordered room service and ate on my patio, watching the sunset without anyone telling me I was being selfish or difficult. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. And contrary to what my parents had always implied, the world didn't end. In fact, it felt like mine was just beginning. My last 2 days in Hawaii were transformative. Without the constant stress of managing my parents' expectations and demands, I discovered what a vacation should actually feel like: relaxing, enriching, and rejuvenating. I woke early and watched the sunrise from the beach, toes buried in the cool sand. I tried paddleboarding for the first time, laughing as I repeatedly fell into the warm Pacific waters before finally finding my balance. I sampled local cuisine at small restaurants away from the resort, engaging with servers and chefs who shared stories about island traditions. In short, I began creating genuine memories rather than funding fake ones for my parents' social media feeds. On my second-to-last morning, I encountered Barbara at the breakfast buffet. She was alone, looking somewhat lost among the families and couples enjoying their meals. "Madison," she called, waving me over. "Do you have a moment?" I hesitated but decided to join her. If nothing else, I was curious about what she might say. "Gerald and I are leaving this afternoon," she began. "But I wanted to speak with you first." "About what?" I asked cautiously. "About your parents." She sighed, stirring her coffee absently. "This isn't the first time they've done something like this, you know." "What do you mean?" Barbara looked uncomfortable but continued. "They've taken advantage of others before. Last year, they convinced Judith's brother to invest in one of Roger's business schemes. He lost $30,000. I wasn't entirely surprised, but the confirmation of a pattern extending beyond me was still jarring. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I admire what you did," she admitted. Standing up to them took courage. "And maybe Gerald and I enabled their behavior by going along with this trip. For that, I'm truly sorry." Her apologies seemed sincere, and I nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you for telling me." After breakfast, I checked my email and found something unexpected: a message from my father. The subject lines simply read, "I'm sorry." I opened it with trepidation, expecting another manipulation tactic. Instead, I found what appeared to be genuine remorse. "Madison, I've never been good at admitting when I'm wrong. Your mother would say I'm not good at it because I'm rarely wrong, but we both know that's not true. The truth is, I'm writing to apologize for my behavior, not just on this trip, but for many years. Watching you walk away from that restaurant table made me realize something. I didn't recognize the strong, independent woman you've become. In my mind, you're still the little girl who needed my approval for everything. But you're not that little girl anymore, and continuing to treat you as if you are isn't fair to either of us. I won't make excuses for how your mother and I have taken advantage of your generosity. It was wrong. We should have been celebrating your success, not exploiting it. I don't expect your forgiveness immediately, or maybe ever. But I wanted you to know that for whatever it's worth, I see what we've done, and I'm truly sorry.
Dad.
I read the email 3 times, trying to detect the usual manipulation between the lines. But for once, it seemed absent. This was the first time my father had ever apologized to me for anything. After careful consideration, I composed a response.
Dad.
Thank you for your apology. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge these patterns. I love you and Mom, but I can no longer allow myself to be treated as a financial resource rather than a daughter. Moving forward, I need several things to maintain a healthy relationship. 1. Clear communication about financial expectations before any shared expenses. 2. Respect for my boundaries when I say no. 3. Inclusion in family activities if I'm contributing financially. 4. Recognition that my success doesn't obligate me to fund everyone else's lifestyle. I hope we can build a new relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. I'm willing to try if you are. Madison. I pressed send before I could overthink it, then headed to the beach for my final day in paradise. On my last morning, I treated myself to breakfast on the beach, watching the sunrise cast golden light across the waves. The hotel manager, Thomas, spotted me and came over. Ms. Lawrence, I hope the new accommodations have been satisfactory. More than satisfactory, I assured him. They've been transformative. He smiled knowingly. Family dynamics can be complicated. In my years of hospitality, I've seen many variations of what you experienced. Any advice? I asked. Just this. Family relationships should bring more peace than anxiety. If they consistently do the opposite, something needs to change. He paused. And it's rarely the person who's already doing all the accommodating. His words resonated deeply. I had spent years contorting myself to fit my parents' expectations and demands, never questioning whether those demands were reasonable or healthy. As I prepared to leave for the airport, I caught a glimpse of my parents in the lobby. They were checking out, looking tired and subdued. For a moment, I considered approaching them, offering one last opportunity for reconciliation before we boarded separate flights. But something held me back. Not anger or resentment, but a newfound respect for my own boundaries. We had exchanged emails. I had said what needed to be said. Rushing to smooth things over in person would only reactivate old patterns. So I watched from a distance, then quietly headed to my own transportation, giving us all space to process what had happened. On the flight home, I found myself seated next to a woman who introduced herself as Elaine, a family therapist returning from a conference. What brought you to Hawaii? She asked conversationally. I surprised myself by sharing an abbreviated version of what had transpired. Rather than looking shocked, she nodded in recognition. What you're describing is a common dynamic in families with poor boundaries, she explained. The emotionally healthiest member often becomes the fixer or the bank because they're the most functional. So, it's my fault for being functional? I asked, half joking. Not at all, Elaine replied seriously. But recognizing the dynamic is the first step to changing it. You've already taken the hardest step by establishing consequences for boundary violations. Will they ever change? I asked, the question that had been haunting me. That's up to them, she said gently. But whether they change or not, you've already changed. And that's what matters most for your well-being. When my plane landed, Stephanie was waiting at arrivals. I fell into her arms, suddenly overcome with emotion. You did it, she whispered, hugging me tightly. You actually did it. I did. I agreed, surprising myself with a laugh. I froze their access to my money and walked away. How does it feel? I considered the question carefully. Like I've been carrying a boulder for years and finally put it down. That night, in my own apartment, I looked around at the space I had created for myself. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, paid for with my hard work and determination. For the first time, I fully appreciated what I had built without feeling obligated to share it with people who didn't respect my boundaries. I was no longer just financially independent. I was emotionally independent too. And that was worth more than any family vacation could ever cost. 3 months after Hawaii, I sat in Dr. Martinez's office for my weekly therapy session. The warm, minimalist space had become a sanctuary of sorts, a place where I could untangle the complex web of family dynamics I'd been caught in for decades. "So, Madison," Dr. Martinez began, "how are things with your parents since our last session?" I considered the question carefully. Different. Not perfect, but different. In the weeks following the Hawaii incident, my parents and I had established a cautious new relationship. My father, surprisingly, had been the first to adapt to the new boundaries. He no longer called asking for loans, and had even returned a small portion of the money I'd spent on their Hawaii accommodations. My mother was having a harder time adjusting. She still occasionally tested boundaries with guilt-laden texts or comments about other parents whose children take care of them properly. But now, instead of immediately capitulating, I simply acknowledged her feelings without accepting responsibility for them. "And how does that feel?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Uncomfortable sometimes," I admitted. "But also right. Like I'm finally being authentic in the relationship." After my session, I met Allison for lunch at our favorite cafe. Since Hawaii, we had grown closer, bonding over our shared experiences and supporting each other in maintaining healthy boundaries with our parents. "Dad called me yesterday," Allison mentioned, as we settled into our booth. "He wanted to know if I thought you'd be open to joining them for Thanksgiving." "What did you tell him?" "That he should ask you directly," she said with a smile, "and that he should be prepared to respect whatever answer you give." I nodded appreciatively. He's trying. It's weird, but that disaster in Hawaii might have been the best thing for our relationship long term. "Sometimes it takes a complete breakdown to create the possibility of something healthier," Allison observed. "I went through my own version 2 years ago, remember?" I did remember. Allison had refused to lend our parents money for a kitchen renovation, resulting in weeks of silent treatment and family drama. At the time, I had thought she was being harsh. Now I understood she had simply been protecting necessary boundaries. The following week brought unexpected news at work. I was being promoted to portfolio manager, a position I had been working toward for years. "Your performance over the past quarter has been exceptional," my boss Franklin explained. "You're showing a confidence in your decision-making that the team has noticed." I thanked him, realizing that the boundaries I had established in my personal life were indeed affecting my professional presence. No longer drained by constant financial and emotional demands, I had more energy to invest in my career and personal growth. That evening, a card arrived in the mail. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately and opened it with curious caution. Inside was a simple birthday wish. My birthday was still 2 weeks away, and a brief note. "Madison, I'm proud of the woman you've become, not because of what you can do for others, but because of who you are. Happy early birthday. Love, Dad." It wasn't an elaborate apology or dramatic declaration, but in its simplicity, it felt more genuine than any of our interactions in recent memory. He was seeing me, not just what I could provide. My mother, meanwhile, continued her campaign of subtle manipulation. Weekly calls included references to friends whose children had purchased them new cars or taken them on cruises. I acknowledged these comments without engaging. "That sounds nice for them. How's your garden doing this season?" Slowly, she was learning that these tactics no longer produced the desired results. Our conversations were becoming shorter, but strangely more authentic as she adjusted to the new dynamic. The real test of my new boundaries came 6 months after Hawaii, when I hosted a dinner party at my apartment. Around my table sat the people who truly supported me: Stephanie, Allison and her boyfriend Michael, my colleague Justin, and my neighbor Rebecca. As we shared food and laughter, I realized I had created my own chosen family of people who respected and valued me. To Madison, Stephanie toasted, raising her glass, who taught us all that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Everyone clinked glasses, and warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the wine. This was what genuine connection felt like, family or not. In the months since Hawaii, I had developed a new system for managing my finances and relationships. I maintained a separate giving account with a strict monthly limit. Once that money was gone, any requests had to wait until the next month. This allowed me to be generous while maintaining control over my resources. I applied this principle to emotional energy as well, learning to recognize when interactions were depleting rather than enriching. When the balance tipped too far toward depletion, I now had the tools and confidence to step back. One afternoon, I unexpectedly ran into Gerald at a coffee shop. He seemed momentarily flustered, but then approached my table. "Madison, hello. I've been hoping to run into you." "Gerald," I nodded, gesturing for him to join me. "I wanted to apologize again for Hawaii," he began. "And to let you know, well, your parents are having some difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" I asked, immediately on guard. "Marital problems primarily," he explained. "Your father has been questioning a lot of their patterns since your confrontation. It's caused some tension between them." I absorbed this information, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Part of me felt guilty for potentially contributing to their marital problems. Another part recognized that any reevaluation of unhealthy patterns was ultimately positive, even if temporarily painful. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "But their relationship is for them to manage, just as my finances are for me to manage." Gerald nodded. "That's fair. And wise." As I walked home from the coffee shop, I reflected on everything that had transpired since that pivotal moment in Hawaii when I had frozen my credit card and walked away from the restaurant. It hadn't been easy. There had been tears, angry phone calls, attempts at manipulation, and moments of doubt. But through it all, I had maintained the boundaries necessary for my well-being. I had discovered that saying no wasn't selfish, it was essential for authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The following week, I did something I had been planning for months. I booked a solo trip to Europe. Not an extravagant tour, but a thoughtfully budgeted exploration of places I had always wanted to see. As I confirmed the reservation, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This was my money, my time, my life to spend as I chose. I had learned that self-respect wasn't selfish. It was the foundation upon which all healthy relationships must be built. By refusing to be the family ATM, I had opened the possibility of becoming something much more valuable, a daughter, a sister, a friend who was valued for who she was, not what she could provide. And that lesson was worth every difficult moment of standing my ground. What boundaries have you had to set with family members who crossed financial or emotional lines? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences about establishing healthy boundaries. Remember to share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Every time you set a boundary, you're not just taking care of yourself, you're teaching others how to respect you. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no.